My name is Timothy, and if there's one thing life has taught me the hard way, it's that marriage is anything but a straight road. People like to believe that if a relationship starts strong, if two people love each other, share the same dreams, and promise to build a future together, then that alone is enough to keep them bound forever. But that's not how it works. Marriages don't shatter in one explosive moment. They erode in quiet, almost unnoticeable ways. And if you're not paying attention, you'll wake up one day feeling as though everything collapsed overnight. But the truth? The cracks had been forming for a long time. You just didn't see them. This is my story, a story of how I went from being a devoted husband, a man who worked tirelessly to build a good life for his wife and himself, to the painful realization that the woman I married had already checked out of our relationship. And what happened next changed everything. In the beginning, everything between Linda and me felt fresh, exciting, and brimming with possibilities. When we got married, we carried a vision, a shared dream of building something greater than what we had come from. Our families were comfortable, but we wanted more than just comfort. We wanted security, success, a future where we didn't have to second-guess splurging on a vacation or treating ourselves simply because we felt like it. That ambition fueled us, kept us motivated, and made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. I've always been ambitious. Civil engineering isn't just about drawing blueprints and signing off on projects. It's hands-on. If you want to succeed, you have to be out there, on-site, ensuring every detail is executed flawlessly. That meant I traveled often, sometimes for weeks at a time. But Linda admired that about me. She loved my work ethic, the way I pushed myself to build something bigger than just a paycheck. In those early years, we saw my absence as a necessary sacrifice, something temporary. We believed that a few years of relentless hard work would put us in a position where I wouldn't have to be away so much. And for a while, that belief was enough. Whenever I was home, I made sure to make up for lost time. We had our little traditions. Dinners at her favorite restaurant, monthly movie nights where we took turns picking the film, spontaneous weekend getaways just the two of us, late-night drives filled with deep conversations. Those moments, I thought, were enough to anchor us, to remind her that no matter how often I traveled, she was always my priority. Looking back, I truly believe we were solid. She never said otherwise. There was no explosive fight, no dramatic confrontation, no clear moment where everything came crashing down. As far as I knew, we were happy. We laughed. We planned for the future. We were a team. If someone had told me back then that our marriage would eventually unravel, I would have laughed in their face. But as my career soared, I wasn't thinking about what the distance was doing to my marriage. My team was good, so good that we kept landing more contracts. More contracts meant more money, but also more time away. I was constantly traveling, overseeing projects, making sure everything ran smoothly. Linda never openly complained. She never accused me of neglecting her or told me that my absence was becoming too much. That's what made it easy to believe that things were fine. Only later did I realize that things weren't fine at all. She had simply learned to live with it. She found ways to fill the empty spaces my absence left behind. She started working longer hours, throwing herself into her job. At the time, I thought it was a good thing. If anything, I felt relieved, less guilty about being away so much. I saw it as her adjusting, not as a warning sign that something was slipping between us. You'd think that after being away for so long, my wife would be excited to see me when I returned, right? That's what I expected. But that's not how it went. The first red flag was her attitude. It wasn't outright hostility, but it wasn't warmth either. She still greeted me, still asked about my trip, but there was no spark behind it, no genuine excitement. The way she looked at me felt different, distant. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself she was just tired or stressed. But every time I came back, the space between us seemed to widen. I tried to engage her, to ask about her day, but she was uninterested. Her responses were short, dismissive. Sometimes she changed the subject. Other times, she simply ignored me. And when I pushed, desperate to know what was wrong, she would sigh and say, "Nothing's wrong, Timothy." But I could feel it. Something was off. Then, she started filling her time with new activities. She joined a gym, picked up tennis, began going out more. At first, I was happy for her. I told myself, it's good she's keeping busy while I'm gone. But then, I noticed something strange. She was keeping busy when I was home, too. I'd return, eager to reconnect, expecting us to catch up, only for her to grab her things and head out. Even when she was home, she was absorbed in her phone, scrolling, texting, watching TV, but never really engaging with me. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and depth, became surface-level exchanges. It was like talking to a stranger who just happened to live in my house. I told myself it would get better, but deep down, I knew, every time I came back, it felt less like coming home. I had been gone for weeks, buried in work, but when I finally returned home, things weren't just tense, they were suffocating. The air between Linda and me had grown colder, thick with unspoken words, heavy with something I couldn't name. She moved around me like a ghost, distant, detached. And yet, I was still clueless. One evening, during one of my breaks, she came home even later than usual. It was close to midnight when I heard the front door open. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her heels clicking softly against the floor, the rustle of her coat being hung, the quiet exhale as she settled in. She didn't check on me. She didn't say a word. The next morning, I knew I had to bring it up. Over breakfast, I kept my voice steady as I asked, "Linda, you've been coming home late a lot lately. Is everything okay?" She didn't even look up from her coffee. "Yeah, I've just been hanging out." "With whom?" I pressed gently. She sighed, finally turning to face me. "With friends, Timothy. Why does it matter?" There was something sharp in her tone, something defensive. "It matters because you've never done this before," I said evenly. "I don't mind you having a social life, but coming home this late doesn't make sense." That's when she snapped. "I'm your wife, not your property. You don't own me." I just stood there, staring at her, caught completely off guard. In all our years together, she had never spoken to me like that. It wasn't anger I felt in that moment. It was something deeper, something colder. I didn't argue. I didn't even know what to say. Instead, I simply nodded and stepped back. From that moment on, everything shifted. She stopped pretending. Conversations became hollow, stripped of any warmth or real engagement. If I tried to talk about anything even remotely emotional, she shut it down. And if I pressed, it turned into an argument. It got to the point where I started dreading our conversations, afraid of her reaction, unsure of what version of her I would get that day. But despite everything, there was one thing I never compromised on: our special days. No matter how demanding my schedule was, I made sure to be home for our anniversary and birthdays. It was our unspoken rule, a promise we had made early in our marriage. No matter what, I would always be there. And I had never broken that promise. This time was no different. The day before our 5th anniversary, I wrapped up my work early, eager to return home. I wanted to settle in, rest, and make sure everything was perfect for the next day. I had planned something special, an intimate evening just for us, a way to reconnect, to remind ourselves of what we had built over the years. When Linda walked through the door that evening, I told her about the plans. I expected a spark of excitement, maybe a teasing smile, some curiosity about what I had in store. Instead, she just gave me a small, empty smile and said, "Okay." Looking back, I should have seen it as a warning. The way she answered, it wasn't the response of a woman looking forward to a romantic evening with her husband. But in that moment, I brushed it aside. The next day, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: anticipation. I had made reservations at her favorite restaurant, picked up a thoughtful gift, something deeply personal that I knew would make her smile. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about reminding her that no matter how much my work kept me away, I never forgot what mattered. She was supposed to be home by 4 p.m. That was our arrangement. That was how it had always been when we had something planned. But 4 p.m. passed. Then 4:30. I told myself not to overthink it. But by the time 5 p.m. rolled around and she was still nowhere to be found, something in my gut twisted. I called her. No answer. I sent a text. No reply. A strange feeling washed over me, something between unease and inevitability. I hesitated, then opened the Find My app on my phone. Her location wasn't at the office. It wasn't even on the way home. She was at a hotel. I stared at the screen, blinking, my heart pounding. I refreshed the app, convinced it had to be a glitch. But no, the location remained the same. A hotel, on our anniversary. My mind raced, scrambling for explanations. Maybe she was meeting someone for work. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting. But I had to see for myself. I grabbed my keys and drove. The GPS led me straight to the address. But when I arrived, I noticed something. The hotel wasn't just a hotel. Attached to it was a quiet, upscale restaurant, tucked just behind the building. I parked across the street and scanned the windows, searching. And then I saw her, Linda, sitting at a table, leaning in close to a man. He was younger than her, handsome, confident. They were laughing, their hands brushing lightly across the table, their body language unmistakable. I watched, frozen, my breath caught in my chest. The intimacy between them was undeniable. But just as I was trying to process what I was seeing, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. A message from Linda. "I'm stuck at work." And just like that, everything snapped into focus. Here was my wife, on our anniversary, sitting with another man, laughing, lying to me with effortless ease. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. I simply typed 2 words in response. No worries. And that was it. I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. Because in that moment, I knew I was done. The drive home was silent, the weight of realization settling over me like a heavy fog. When I got there, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing. I wasn't thinking about what I was leaving behind, only what I needed to take with me. I packed, zipped up the bag, and walked out without looking back. I turned my phone on silent, tossed it onto the passenger seat, and drove. The road stretched ahead of me, dark and empty, the occasional headlights of passing cars the only movement in the night. By the time I pulled into a small roadside motel, it was 2 a.m. Inside, I locked the door, dropped my bag by the bed, and finally reached for my phone. 10 missed calls, all from Linda. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my gallery, found the photo I had taken of her with that man, and sent it. Seconds later, my phone lit up again. Another call, then another, then a flood of texts. Linda had officially lost it. She was all over the place, denying it, then trying to explain, then blaming me for not being around, then back to denying it again. I wasn't interested in her justifications. I wasn't interested in her guilt-driven attempts at damage control. Weeks later, I filed for divorce. Because after everything, I finally understood. She hadn't left me that night at the restaurant. She had left me a long time ago. On our anniversary, I saw the truth laid bare before me. There was no coming back from it. Some wounds can be healed, some mistakes forgiven, but not this. Betrayal is a line that, once crossed, changes everything. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity, and braced myself for the battle ahead. Linda, of course, didn't take it well. She flipped the script with the ease of someone who had long perfected the art of manipulation. In her version of events, I was the one who had destroyed our marriage. She painted herself as the abandoned wife, the victim of a husband who was too consumed by his career to notice her loneliness. To anyone who would listen, she spun a tale of neglect, of nights spent alone, of a love that had withered because I had stopped watering it. But I wasn't surprised. People like Linda don't take responsibility for their actions. They rewrite the story until they come out looking innocent. And in her story, I was the villain. Fortunately, the state we lived in had laws that favored the spouse who had been wronged. The truth was on my side. The court saw her for what she was, the one who had broken our marriage vows. She wasn't entitled to the things she thought she was going to get. But that didn't stop her from trying. She fought for more, claiming that she had supported me emotionally while I built my career, that she had sacrificed for our marriage and deserved a significant share of everything I had worked for. She wanted more than what was fair. She wanted compensation, as if betrayal had somehow left her deserving of a reward. The divorce dragged on for months. It was exhausting. Meetings with lawyers, endless back-and-forth arguments, heated negotiations over what was fair and what wasn't. Linda made it as difficult as possible, probably hoping that I would give in just to make it all stop. But I didn't. By the end of it, she had to accept the reality. She walked away with a fair settlement, but not the payday she had envisioned. She had a job. She could support herself. And the court saw no reason to grant her anything extra simply because she wanted it. I won't call it a victory, because nothing about divorce feels like winning. No one enters a marriage believing that one day they'll be signing papers to end it. No one says I do with the thought that it will one day turn into I'm done. Now that everything is behind me, there are lessons I've taken from this experience, lessons I hope someone else can learn before it's too late. Neglect is dangerous. Marriage is like fire. It needs attention to keep burning. If you don't nurture it, it fades. I believe that providing for my wife, making sure she was comfortable, was enough. I thought love was in the grand gestures, in always showing up for anniversaries, in making sure she never wanted for anything. But love isn't just about presence, it's about connection. What I didn't realize was that my absence, even when I was physically there, created a gap, and she found someone else to fill it. That doesn't justify what she did, but I can't ignore the reality. Neglect weakens a relationship. You can't put your marriage on autopilot and expect it to survive. The signs were there. People don't just wake up one day and decide to cheat. It starts small, subtle shifts, quiet red flags. Conversations become shorter, emptier. Emotional distance grows, turning into silence. Passive-aggressive comments slip into daily interactions. A change in how they spend their time, where they go, who they talk to. People leave emotionally long before they physically walk away. By the time I saw it for what it was already too late. And sometimes you have to know when to walk away. Not every relationship is worth saving. I used to believe love could fix anything, that if I just tried harder, made more time, sacrificed more, we could make it work. But a relationship isn't something one person can fix alone. If the other person has already given up, there's nothing left to fight for. Love is a two-way street, and if you're the only one walking, you'll eventually realize you're walking alone. It hurt to accept that, but in the end, I chose myself. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, learn from this. If you've been neglecting your partner, fix it before it's too late. If you've been ignoring the signs, open your eyes. And if you find yourself in a relationship where you are no longer respected, valued, or loved, don't be afraid to let go. Some endings aren't losses. They are just the start of something new.